In this class, I'm going to talk about some of the more advanced search techniques. In essence, what we're going to do is look beyond just the simple things that you probably know about for doing Google search and see a little bit the more sophisticated techniques that you can use to make your searches more precise and broader, and how to make trade-offs between those two. Let me begin by casting your mind back, because I've given a version of this class earlier at National Geographic. In class 1, we covered things as you see here: geographic information, maps, photos, search by image, stuff like that. In this class today, what I want to cover are some of the more advanced topics. So we're going to start off with things like the around operator and start to think about what other kinds of operations you can do. Talk about a little bit of theory, like what Boolean queries are, and then we'll get into different kinds of properties like the Public Data Explorer, maps, crisis maps, and so on. So let's start. The very first thing I want to point out to you as a way of jumping into this topic is that we have operators that not everybody knows about. For example, the around operator is a great tool if you want to search for phrase 1 near phrase 2. So this is an around operator like you've seen in other systems. It basically looks within a certain radius. In here, in the example you see here, Jerry Brown, to the quoted phrase, around 9 Tea Party. That means look for Jerry Brown within 9 terms, plus or minus, forward or back, and the phrase Tea Party. This is a fantastic thing to be able to know, because you can now look for co-located terms or phrases. Here I'm searching for 2 co-located phrases, and you can see on the left-hand side I've searched for Jerry Brown around 9 Tea Party. So that's searching for those 2 phrases within 9 words of each other. Compare that with the one on the right, where I'm just searching for those 2 phrases, and they could be arbitrarily far apart. So there could be, for example, an entire article about something and then have those 2 phrases, arbitrarily many words distance. Here's an example. Let me search for National Geographic within 8 words of the word Smithsonian. Now what I've done here is you can see that if you actually click on any of those pages, you'll see National Geographic appearing with plus or minus 8 words of the term Smithsonian. This is a great way, like I said, for searching for things that are close to each other. Notice this does not respect sentence or paragraph boundaries. But generally speaking, if this term here is within 8 words of that term, it's a good chance there's a common shared thread between those 2 concepts. Now, let me back up just even a little bit more. So you know about that operator. Now, in the context of Google, a lot of what you've learned about doing Boolean operations just isn't quite applicable here. For example, the term and doesn't do anything. There is no and operator in Google. So you can do X and Y and Z, but all that does is search for X, Y, Z, and the term and. Implicitly, everything in a Google query is implicitly soft-anded together. So that funny phrase means we and terms together until it doesn't make any more sense. So sometimes you'll do X, Y, Z as your query terms, and we implicitly and those together. But if it's a crazy making result, for example, there are no results with that, we may drop query Z. You'll see that sometimes when the query result returns and it says without term Z, or whatever it is. So OR basically allows you to do synonyms, and Google's synonym system is really good. So for example, we synonymize terms that you wouldn't think of as synonyms, like American and United are synonyms. How do we know that? Because what Google does is it looks at people doing their queries and then sees what they actually click on. And so people will often do a query like American Airlines 219. And there is no American Airlines Flight 219. But there is a United Flight 219. And so we say, oh, no, you meant United, right? And people get the result and they're happy. They're totally happy. And they won't even notice that we switched the words on them. For similar reasons, the words Democrat and Republican are synonyms. It goes over well in Washington. It doesn't work anywhere else. Another question, yeah.
My question is, yeah. I see that you put or and in capitals. What happens if you don't put them in capitals?
Good question, good question. The question is, why did I capitalize and or? Well, I just told you and is just another word, so it doesn't matter. So the bigger story there is capitals don't matter, except for the one case you pointed out, which is or has to be capitalized. Otherwise, you're searching for Oregon, right? Okay, so you have to remember that. Or is the one thing in the whole Google verse that has to be capitalized. Thank you for pointing it out. And the word not, Boolean people, remember not? Okay, it doesn't work either. If you type in the word not into a Google search, it will search for the word not. You have to use minus if you want to exclude a term from your search. So for example, salsa recipe minus dancing. It gets rid of all that dance stuff, right? Or minus cilantro, for those of you who are cilantro haters, right? Salsa recipe minus cilantro. Okay, so that's kind of what I wanted to say today about more sort of the details of Google search. Now I'm going to show you a bunch of resources because one of the things I've found in my studies of how searchers work is that people kind of muddle through these technical details and they include words like and, doesn't hurt them, doesn't help them, doesn't hurt them. They don't know about minus, but they figure it out. What they don't know and what the hallmark of expert searchers are is that they know a lot of resources. So I'm going to go through a few resources now to give you some idea what's possible. So for example, one of the resources that we have is called Public Data Explorer. And what this is, it's a tool in Google where you can search through different data sets that we've accumulated from places like the UN or Bureau of Labor Statistics or UNESCO or whatever. And so we've got a gazillion different resources, okay? So we can draw on all of this. And in particular, if you go to Google Public Data Explorer, you can ask questions like, what is this, unemployment rate for different counties. And here I'm showing you the graph for Imperial County versus Santa Clara County. And I live in Santa Clara County, so that's the hub of Silicon Valley. But the Imperial County has this wildly fluctuating seasonal unemployment rate. And this tells you what Imperial County is all about, this one graph. Anybody have an idea what that is? What's going on in Imperial County? Farming, exactly. This is the unemployment rate as people come in and go out of agricultural seasons. I don't know what they're going to do with the impending drought. Maybe it's just going to flatten out. Anyway, you should know about Public Data Explorer. And so what I'm going to do is take 1 second and show you how to find that. So you can say things like unemployment rate. So go ahead and try this with me if you want. Unemployment rate for Maryland. And the chart here is showing you, I'm just going to make this big so you can see it all. What this is showing you is that this is the data, and you see the byline there, sources include Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is not unsurprising. But you can see we've also plotted two other things here, Washington, D.C. unemployment rate and Virginia. And the reason they're there, even though you didn't ask for them, is that a million people in front of you have asked for Maryland, D.C., and Virginia. And so we're trying to help you out. We're saving you a step. So that's where that's coming from. You can click through to this to explore more. And now, of course, you can see, let's compare it with, say, Florida. Ooh, interesting. So Public Data Explorer is this data set collection that we've got, and we kind of constantly update it because we get feeds from all these different organizations. And it's there, and you can play with it. You can fool around to your heart's content. There's also multiple visualizations here. So if you want, you can, for example, see it as a bar chart or as a pie chart or a chloropleth or as a bubble chart here. And so what you can do here is watch the things change over time. You can turn trails on. There's a bunch of stuff you can do with this. And it works for all the different data sets. So let's go look at public data. So here I've come to the top level page. Now, let me tell you the one thing you need to remember. Public Data Explorer. I know Dan showed that to me a while ago. How do I get to it? The answer is easy. When in doubt, search it out. So you would do a search for Google, public data, like that. and it's always the first hit. You don't, so the thing I'm telling you, you should never remember a URL. Stop writing those URLs down. You're just wasting space in your brain. Okay? So search for it like that. And as I show you all these resources, all you really have to do is kind of remember the name roughly. And so if you go there, it takes you to this place. Okay? So you can see here all the different data sets. We have many, many, many pages of this. So you want to go look at Ebola statistics. You can go do that, and you can explore it. In this case, it's coming from Humanitarian Data Exchange. So you can get everything, all the metadata is there. You can actually go check it out. Okay, so here's, so that's one resource I wanted to clue you into, because another thing that I find a lot of really expert searchers do is they know what resources are available, and they know the tools they can use to work on those data sets or work on that kind of area. And so here's an example I want you to think about. What's the relative rate of measles immunizations worldwide? So if you've got a second, I'll give you like a minute here to do this. Everything I've told you should allow you to answer this question in 30 seconds. Go ahead, start searching, it's okay. And people who have phones, you can do this on your phone too, which means everybody, right? A smartphone, you know, basic phones won't work. So the question here is, how can you compare these different country rates? And I want you to compare Canada to US to Iceland to Mexico. And I've already given you a really big hint here. Okay, has everybody found the measles in the Public Data Explorer set? So here, I'll give you, don't look for a second if you haven't solved it already. So your first step should have been to search for Google Public Data Explorer. Then within that, search for measles. And now it already brought me here to the immunization rate for kids aged 12 to 23 months. So this is just little kids. And you see down at the bottom, the Compare tab. This is where you start to get to access to the other data sets. So I'm going to look here for North America. I click, this is, you might want to watch. I'm going to click on this little triangle. See that? Click on the triangle. I get the United States. Remember, the dark blue line is worldwide. That's aggregated data for the whole universe. Red is the United States. Now, what else did I say? I wanted to look at Latin America. I want to look at Mexico. There's Mexico. We should be slightly embarrassed by this.
Dan, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Because the data from World Bank last updated,
Yep.
Does that mean that the data is March 19th or that Google last updated from the World Bank on March 19th?
We last did a data pull from them.
So it may be that the data is older than March 19th.
Correct. Yeah. So exactly. So you can see here, that's a great point, because the data, so the question for the video, for you, is what is the data update frequency and what's its refresh and how do we tell? You can tell way down here in the bottom, last updated date, that was the last data pull. You read the end of the chart here, it goes to what, 2013 roughly. So they haven't updated their tables since 2013. So this is a couple years old. Anyway, this is how you do it. Another question.
If I wanted to find where on the World Bank website this came from, I clicked on World Bank, but it just goes to their homepage.
Okay, then you're going to have to search inside of that to do that. Data. And you can either do it this way, because this is where they're pretty good about their data sets. So they're not that hard to find. But you can either do that, or if you want to be very clever, you could do something like this, site colon, oops. Here I'm just going to search their data, measles. There you go. That's their data set right there. That make sense? So the one trick for people who didn't, does everybody know about site colon? Just checking? Okay. Go watch the video from last year. Well, no, I'll show you what I did.
You guys know how to do that on the advanced search tab. try not to do
Yeah.
the search bar.
So I do it this way because it's faster. So just so you can see it, I did site colon before the name of the domain I wanted to search. And this could be whatever. In this case, it's the measles. It could be, for example, fda.gov.
Could be National Geographic.
It could be nationalgeographic.com, yeah. And just because it's so much fun, I'm going to do .mx. Well, let's not do it. Let's do UK. And now we're looking at all the websites in the United Kingdom, right? Okay. So what you have to do is remember how to do that. Site colon .uk, we can look for edu. If you want to search universities in the US, because edu is only US. Did you know that? Right? It doesn't include institutions like the University of Toronto, Simon Fraser, UBC, McGill, I can go on. Right? So remember that when you use the site colon thing. Okay. Oh, one other thing. I want to show you this. Go here, go back there. We have recently introduced a thing you'll see on the right-hand side. Does you see this whole thing about measles right here? This is a whole, we call this a knowledge panel. Whenever you see that, like that illustration for medical conditions and all these facts that come here, for this, it's actually coming from our medical knowledge graph. So these are things that we pretty carefully vetted. In this case, it's vetted through, I think, Mayo. Yeah. So all these will have attribution, so you can go track it down. One of the resources I want to tell you about, and you can explore that at your heart's content. It's really fun. There's more stuff in there than you can dream of. So if you're a data junkie, stay away. It's bad. Okay. Now, I know you have a particular interest in maps. And how many people here have used Google Maps before? Everybody, right? How many of you have used My Maps, Google My Maps? Anybody? A couple. Okay, we're going to talk about that then. So one of the nice things about these interactive maps like we do is it's not full GIS. Now, secretly inside my heart of hearts, it is real GIS. And if you work inside of Google, you know that we actually do all the transformations and all that stuff. But we try to put a user-friendly interface on this. So you can do things like ask questions like, how far is it from the DeYoung Museum in San Francisco to the train station in San Francisco, right? But if you want to ask a question like this, you want to hike from the Yosemite Visitor Center to the top of Glacier Point, there's no hike option, right? Or if you're going cross country, like, on say a transect or something, there's no way to do that, but I'll show you how to do it anyway. Okay? So obviously, Google Transportation stuff is great. I found out this morning that I could either walk from my hotel here in 15 minutes or take the metro, and it would take 12 minutes. And I thought, it's a nice day and walking, right? So here I've answered that question, how far is it from Caltrain station in San Francisco to the DeYoung Museum in Golden Gate Park? And if you take a bus, you can see it's already showing you the answer here. It's saying that it takes 51 minutes. The best route is 45 minutes using the tram. That's what that little symbol means. And you can click on all these to do driving or walking. Don't walk. It's a bad idea. It'll take you forever. It's like, that's about 5 miles across, and it's complicated and stuff. But you can use this relatively new product called Google My Maps. Wow, a little bit of history and context. We've had maps for a long time, and you probably know in about 2007, don't hold me to it, but it's roughly 2007, before that time, we used to buy data from map providers. In 2007, we switched over to our own map data. So that's all those cars you see running around the universe and all the images we have from Google Earth and all that. We consolidated all that information, and that now is what drives Google Maps. Okay? So that's Google data. So if there's something wrong in it, let me know, I'll fix it. Or better yet, you can file a feedback bug in Google Maps. And I've done this before, and they're actually fantastic because they will write back to you and say, oh, we fixed it. Here, would you check it out for us? And so I found errors, for example, in the maps in Los Angeles right on the coast where San Pedro is, because it's, as you know, kind of a bluff with really terrible sand, and so roads are constantly falling off. And I found one that had just fallen off, and I fixed the map, and they fixed it for me in like 4 or 5 days. It was great. Anyway, go ahead and Google My Maps like that. So you see the thing in blue? That's a query, a suggested query. Again, who can remember that URL? You shouldn't. Google it out, right? When in doubt, search it out. So go ahead, and you'll see there's the query, and there's the result, My Map. So when you get to My Maps, actually, I'm going to do this for you. This is so much fun. Oh, you have to be logged in to a Google account to create a map. So if you don't have a Google account, just create one.
We all do.
You all do? Okay. Oh, great. Then you need to be logged in, and you can see, you click on the first result, and I want to create a new map. Click on the Create New Map. So go ahead and do this. People on phones, sorry. I don't think you can do it on a phone. But what you can do here is you got a lot of options, and I could spend an hour just on this. And at a place like this, it'd be totally fun, but I'm just going to do it in 2 minutes. I'm going to search for Yosemite. There it is, Yosemite. What I want to do is to change the base map. So watch this. So the base map is the bottom layer. So in this case, I could take the road map, or the satellite map, or the terrain map, which means topographic. So I'm going to do that. Okay. So now that's Yosemite. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And at this point now I can start adding a line. So I'm just going to fake it here. I'm not going to go through the whole process, but I'll just do it really quickly. I'm going to add a line. I'm just going to start. This is Glacier Point right here. And I'm going to start dropping the line here like this. And yeah, if I zoomed in more, you can see the whole trail, but that's an approximation to it. Double click to end. Dan's demo trail. Okay, so I guessed that at 0.7 miles. This is really fun. You can do all kinds of stuff with it. There is another resource called Google Map Gallery that shows you a million examples of this kind of stuff. So you can go check it out there. So here's actually, I worked it out, zooming in a little bit more, and that's the actual trail right there with all the zigzags as you go down the contours. And if you click on that, you'll see it's actually about 3 miles. But that's the kind of stuff you can do. So for example, and these maps are shareable. So if you go to my account or look up a my DM Russell wildflower map, for example, I have a map of where you can go see great wildflowers in the Bay Area. So I just dropped a bunch of pins and labeled them. Go here to see blue-eyed grass. Go here to see California poppies. Go here to see lupins or whatever. Now the reason I'm bringing this up is because remember what this talk is really about? I'm showing you a bunch of stuff, but it's also about how to expand your thinking and think, how can I ask questions that I couldn't ask before, right? So using My Maps, it now becomes easy to answer questions like this. Find me a bed and breakfast that has a view of this fog. It's within 10 miles of the bed and breakfast. It's near a long lake and near the Googleplex. Okay, that's 5 different conditions. So what I would do is basically, I posted this in my blog a couple years ago, and the answer is still the same. First, you search for the Googleplex. That's that pin right there, A. So that's the pin, and now you know where the Googleplex is. So I will spare you a couple of minutes here by saying that patch of fog you saw is coming through the San Mateo Gap in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And so what I can do is then search for bed and breakfasts, and now I can start to draw lines from the gap, which is right there in the blue pin, to the bed and breakfast. And finally, I find one that's 8.59 miles. So draw, 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 you're done. All of a sudden, pardon?
You have a helicopter.
Well, we've got a satellite view. That's pretty good, right? Yeah, right. Yeah, if you're just looking at the fog, right? You're not going to walk up there. Anyway, you see what you can do now, right? Is to start to actually understand geographic information in new ways. Right? I know this is not a big surprise to you, but a lot of people, when they see something like this, are just shocked. Now, that's my maps. Now, you also know about Street View, right? Google Street View. So Google Street View, let me do this real quick, is the tool, the little yellow guy on the bottom right. I can drag him around anywhere. Does anybody not know this? No, okay. So I can drag it up to, say, here, and you get the Street View. That's great. All of the options available to you simply by clicking on the man. And do you see that? So this is downtown Moscow. And if you just single click on the yellow peg man, it blues out everything. Everything that's blue is street viewable. That's where one of our cars has gone. And so yes, one of the Google cars has driven through Red Square. If you're old enough like me, that would have been impossible during the Cold War, right? But now we've got really high-res imagery of Red Square and photos to go with it on the bottom. So let's switch back to this map. So you see, there's another thing I want to show you here. So actually, let's do this just for fun. National Geographic. So we're here, and what I can do is single click on the pegman to see all the blue areas. Okay, that's kind of what you expect. What you might not have noticed is that blue dot right there. What that shows me, if I click on the blue dot, it shows me that we've got more information on this. And these yellow dots are photospheres of the insides of businesses. So let me click on, anybody go to barcode? Okay. Then you'll recognize this, right? This is from March 2012, the timestamp's upper left. So this is inside. So this is basically Street View for the insides of restaurants and museums and stuff. And if let's do something also fun here. White House. I know where it is, but yes, the restaurants do that. And basically they take a camera. You can do this actually. You can take a photosphere using I've done this before. You can use your camera and do like this, right? And it will create a three-dimensional 360 view. Of course, your feet usually end up in it, but mostly everything else works out. And then you can upload it to Google Maps. Yeah. And of course, it will be geotagged, so it will show up there. So there are a million geospheres for things like Diamond Head in Hawaii. But here, the reason I want to show this to you is, let me zoom in a little bit. And I'm going to click on the pegman. And this is sort of interesting. There's all these blue Street View things inside the White House because we've got, I'm going to drag it here and there somewhere. There we are. So we've got Street View interior as well. So increasingly we've got several guys who take this cart and push it around through airports or through museums or whatever, and it does Street View interior. But it shows up in the Street View map, and if you click on the pegman, you can find all that stuff. So you could do one for, say, your museum space. So be aware of, I forgot, there's one other thing I want to show you. So this is Street View. I'll drag it out here in front. Now I think this is a fairly boring, I don't mean that way. It doesn't change very much over the years. So, which one, that corner? Okay, so Street View Archive is here. You see the clock icon right here? If I click on this button, like that, it shows me the range of available Street View images over time. Okay? It goes back to 2007 because that's the first time we went there. Click on that, and it shows you what it looked like in 2007. Even the cars are different. Aha! Okay, you do a Street View, and it's in the upper left, right there. If you're running an old browser version, IE 6 or something, it won't work. Okay, or this is fun. I can't resist this one. this is where I live, and I want to show you this place right here. Oh. Just to give you an idea for what kinds of things are possible here. I'm going to show you a street near my house. That's the train tracks. I've got to move up a little bit. Okay, so there's a giant grocery store right there, right? That's the same place from 2011. If we back up to 2008, you'll see there's a grocery store there, but it's somewhat different. It's way in the back there. So that's the old grocery store. If we change this view to, say, 2011, you can see it's all been demoed. It's all flattened out, and then the next image, you see they're starting to build it. And so for places that are undergoing massive land use changes, this is incredibly handy. So, for example, looking at a neighborhood shifting over time, go to New York, you can see gentrification happening. Go to downtown San Francisco, you can see the effect of tech workers. Right? So we've already done a bunch of this archival imagery from the street. One deep thing to realize is that Google has a lot of this stuff, and if you're a programmer, you can have API access to some of these tools, to the maps and Street View and so on. But in general, we live in a time where data is being remixed and recombined in interesting ways. So, for example, there's this thing called data mashups, where people basically take data of form X and somehow convert it to form Y, and they either visualize it or do whatever. One of the best known versions of this is the if this then that, IFTTT. You know about this? It's a way to script the internet. IFTTT. Check it out. That's an easy way, without being a programmer, where you can set up things to happen automatically. So, for example, one of the recipes that came out recently was that every time that North Carolina plays, it changes the background color of your cell phone to North Carolina blue, if you want that, right? I set up one the other day where every time my cell phone goes to the Googleplex at work, it opens up a Google spreadsheet and writes down the time I got to the Googleplex. And when I leave, it writes down the time I left. So it's automatically logging my entrance and exits from work. It's for me, not for you. Right? I could share that, say, with Barbara, right? But that's the kind of remixing of data and data access that you can get to now without being a programmer. I mean, that was literally 30 seconds for me to set that up. Anyway, that's not what I wanted to talk about. That's just a sidebar. What I really want to talk about is people who do this. They remix data. In this case, I'm showing you an example of a guy who took the school performance data and created different colored pins depending on the rank score of that school. Okay, so here, to find it, you do the query mashup school performance. And he's got multiple states. I don't remember if Maryland or Virginia is in it, but you can check it out. But what it allows you to do, in this case, I clicked on my kids' school when they were in elementary school, and you can see they did all right, you know, and there's the history. But that data is not from Google, it's from the National School Testing Program, whatever that is. And he has inserted it into Google Maps. This is not hard to do. It's the kind of thing where if you read my blog or you read someone else's blog, it's a fairly straightforward process. But we now have this ability to remix data. Taking data, say, from National Geographic and visualizing it on Google Maps or vice versa. Moral of the story here, this kind of stuff is becoming increasingly possible for anybody to do, but you have to make the data available. You have to do that. Second big moral for you as researchers is you should always, always, always look to see if someone has already done the work you're about to do, right? As we say, 2 minutes of research can save 2 weeks in the lab, right? And it kind of doesn't matter whatever you're going to do. If you can articulate what your research question is, someone has probably done some piece of that before, and you can leverage their work. You want to check it, right? You want to validate it. You want to make sure it's credible. But look for it first, and this is one way to search for it. So suppose you're searching for, making this one up. Railways in South Africa between 1800 and 1900. Trust me, someone has done work on that already. Okay, so can you, for example, find a mashup that's showing current emergency situations worldwide? Trust me, this is one of those research questions. Someone has probably done this already. So the query I would do is mash up worldwide emergencies. And if you want to, go ahead and do this. And what I hope you find at fairly near the top of that is something like this. This is the Google crisis map. But the point is that by doing that search for mashing up this information, you can find the Google crisis map, and there are a few other maps that do the same kind of thing. So the Google crisis map is nice because it's showing you a real-time feed of where, this is not real-time, this is from a few days ago. But it's showing you, for example, different locations where there's critical weather events, there might be disasters happening in one form or another. So if you're a disaster junkie, this is your lifeblood. Those clouds, interestingly enough, are real-time. There's a layer you can turn on for clouds, and so you can see the hurricane warning or typhoon warning for some place, and you can see the weather system as it's moving in. Same thing for snow events. This is from the summer, so it's somewhat different. It also shows earthquakes, tropical storms, volcanoes, should they happen, and so on. Deep point. Data's out there. Sometimes other people have taken care of it and visualized it and made it accessible to you. Sometimes you have to do that on your own. But always search for someone else's work first. Okay? So, speaking of work someone else has done, one of the incredibly powerful things that Google, sources of information that Google has, is the queries that people make. Now, we've made this accessible to you through a tool called Google Trends. And what you can do is search it out by searching for Google Trends, right? And this will take you to a page that looks like this. And this is actually from, I think, last night. In this case, the #1 query in the universe is for Andreas Lubnitz. It is for Zayn Malik, which, as we all know, is the tragic departure of one of the members of One Direction. But you get to the idea. This is actually giving you a pulse of the planet in some ways. And you can drill down by region, by hemisphere, by country, and you can also add your own queries to this. You can check to see, for example, what people are doing in terms of queries for the word basketball, football, baseball for the past, I don't know, 10 years or so. Okay? So this is an interesting thing to do because all of a sudden you can do, and I encourage you to do this, compare, I'll just do it for you. And what I'm going to do up here in the very top is search for flu, comma, influenza. What do you think is going to happen? What it's going to show me is the graph of query volume for those two words for over the past, since 2005, past 10 years. Okay? And what you see immediately is the blue line here is flu, and the red line is influenza. So the first thing that suggests to you is that although the technical name is influenza, relatively few people ask for influenza. It's only people like you that do, and we are in the vast minority. The other thing you can see is there's this giant spike here, and if you click on that, you actually, well, that's not my problem. The Globe and Mail blew it. But there was a newspaper article in that time for the outbreak of swine flu, 2009. And so you can start to see what's going on here. And of course, you see this natural pulse that's basically winter to winter to winter to winter to winter. Some winters are worse than others. Comma. Yay. I'll cut that out of the video because I'm going to go talk to the Smithsonian. But you can see the same sort of things happening here. 125th anniversary, Australia is worried about things you say, so on. Okay? Now, one thing to note is there's this slight downward trend. That's true for almost all queries. because it's a relative volume thing, so the fraction of queries from National Geographic in, say, 2015 down here is smaller than it was in 2005 because overall the pool got bigger. So don't worry about that. I mean, you just have to sort of discount for that because we don't do it relatively. Yes?
Is it possible to look at sort of a larger category of items, so if we were to put in United States holidays or top food choices or something like that?
Oh, yeah, that's sort of. So so the question was, can I look at different kinds of categories of things? So for example, we could look at, let's do pets and animals. So here I'm searching for these terms within that category. So I can search, let me change my query to be, well, let me delete those two, add the term, yeah, oops. Well, yes. Yeah. Yeah. You have to give it a specific word, but so I would say dog or puppy or kitten or something, and then search within that category, right? But you can't search for the entire category. But now I wonder, could I do dogs or cats? I don't know. Dogs or cats. Let's see what it does. Oh yeah, look at that. So this is searching for the total query volume of dogs or cats. I'm going to do horses. Ooh, that's phenomenal. And you can also, as I said, sort of cut this down by region. So let's look at, say, United Kingdom. Wow, again, they're horse crazy country. The forecast is we have these fairly complex models that learn the trends over time, and it's projecting forward. So if, for example, let me ask you a simple question. This is red. This is football. Notice any pattern there? Right? So that is the Super Bowl, the peak every year. And then, Pro Bowls and all that stuff. And you can also see the relative value of basketball versus football. But the projection forward is just basically saying, we've seen the same pattern go on for years. I'm pretty confident it's going to go with the same forward. So this is in the realm of statistical modeling, but we have these statistical models for any signal like this, and we just run it forward. There's also hot trends, which is the top rated ones. You get to that by clicking on the upper left, where you see what we call the hamburger menu up there, and you can get different cuts on that data. Remember, you can also dissect this by region. When you do that, remember, not all the world speaks English, so football means something very different depending on where you're at. So football means something different in India, for example, than it does in the United States. And it means something very different in Australia. Okay. So I bring this up because in this quest to amplify what we can think about, what we can do, remember, we are a minority of the world. Right? Now, this is a particularly appropriate place to talk about this because the rest of the world is really interesting. So I got very interested in this J-pop singer a couple of years ago because I heard her music when I was in Hawaii. I thought, oh, interesting. And I'd heard her on the radio, and the announcer said, oh, this is Tsuji Ayano playing, Kaze ni Naru. And so I went to Google and did my best approximation of her name. And it's so interesting what happens here, right? It says, Tsuji Ayano, no dummy, that's not the way you spell her name. In English, right? So think about what's happened here. It took my broken English Japanese translation and converted it to Japanese and translated it back to the proper romanization of that, right? This is kind of an interesting round trip. And of course, you see the other suggestions there? The things that are below my original query. A, the correct spelling of her name, but B, her most popular song, Kaze ni Naru, right? On the lyrics and so on, right? So now I'm happy to say I've gone to her website and I've downloaded her entire oeuvre onto my iPod. But the point is that all of a sudden, different parts of the world are available to you in interesting new ways. So, for example, you can search in Hindi on google.co.in in India. So this is something a lot of people don't realize, is that there are many different Googles. There's google.co.za, ZA for South Africa, which, guess what, offers multiple different languages, including ones you may not speak, like Zulu, right, or Afrikaans. So remember this, and remember, when you do that, it's not necessarily google.es for Spain, or DE. It might be google.co.es or google. You can't predict it, so when in doubt, search it out, right? So Google Bhutan, for example, or Google Brazil. But remember, when you do that, you may not get some results. So for example, there is no Google Bhutan. You can still search for things in Bhutan using the site operator we talked about earlier. So Google:BT will search for content in Bhutan, but there's not a Google index of Bhutan. See the difference? You can limit your searches to pages in that country. Or, in some cases, you can actually use the Google that indexes all the content of that country. So in Bhutan, it's just too small. So it's not worthwhile for us to set up a whole separate index for that. Question, Parker.
How do you know the abbreviations with sites?
I'm glad you asked that question. When in doubt, search it out. All right, you knew I was going to say that. So Google, India. And so you see here, Google India, co.in. Okay? And there's one other thing I wanted to point out, which is, I forgot to mention this earlier. There's two things to point out here. See the green URL here I've highlighted? Right next to it is a little downward arrow. That will give you the cached version of that page, which is the one we saved previously. We're not the Internet Archive. We're not caching everything forever. We just cache the previous version. But for political reasons, you might want to go look at the previous version of, say, a senator's homepage, because oftentimes they change their position. But you can also find similar. So in this case, this will find other organizations that Google looks at as being similar to National Geographic. And you do this on any site. The other thing to point out is this downward arrow, which nobody clicks on, but we're very proud of it, because it shows this, a kind of a summary of the company, the site, with when it was founded, awards that were granted, summary of it, and so on. Right. So this gives you kind of a little bit of background information on a site, and if there's nothing there, you might view it with some skepticism, because it has no street cred for us. Okay, so that's how you find out the answer to that. Okay. Now, one of the things I find so interesting is when you start to look into other cultures, one of the things you realize is that they have very different worldviews than we do. I know, no surprise here, right? But one of the ways this is reflected is in their different entries in Wikipedia. Now, get this. We have this pretty good translation system. So I can go to the Italian version of Wikipedia and say, show me Leonardo da Vinci's entry. And on the left, you can see the English version of the Italian Wikipedia article on Leonardo da Vinci. And on the right is the English language version. Notice anything different about them? Yeah. Watch this. This animation is really telling. I'm just going to scroll through the two versions of it. The Italians really care about Leonardo, right? They have over 23,000 words in their entry, and we have a mere 8,000 words in the English language entry. What's more, the biography section of the Italian Wikipedia article is longer than the entire English article. Okay? What this is telling me is A, they really care, but B, more importantly, there's a bunch of stuff in the Italian version that never makes it over. The concepts are very different in the Italian version than the English version. So, moral of this story, if you're looking up information about a national hero like Leonardo for Italy or Benito Juarez for Mexico, go read it in their Wikipedia article or go read things in their language because it's not the same, right? Another great example of this is these are the two Wikipedia articles in English and in Russian on the Russian mob. Yeah, it's even more dramatic because the Russian article has all kinds of stuff about the Russian mob that people in the United States just don't care about. But they go into great detail. It's really interesting contrast. So if you have the time, this is a really fascinating thing to do. And with Google Translate, it gives you access to these things. So as an example, if you're looking for content, say in the Democratic Republic of Congo, you're trying to understand, say, what's going on with money laundering there. So I looked it up in French, and it's that phrase in French. I go to google.co.cd. So I'm looking up money laundering, the concept money laundering on Google in the Democratic Republic of Congo's Google site, and then I can use Google Translate to translate those results. So you see what you have? Here you've got this kind of remix culture happening all over again because I've got the tool of translation built in. And here's an interesting fact that was discovered by some friends of mine at Northwestern. They looked at a lot of different Wikipedia articles, cross-cultural, the same article. For example, this will surprise you. Look at the English language version of the Wikipedia article on cat and compare that with the Spanish language version article on cats. I mean, a house cat is a house cat is a house cat. No. The Spanish language version has a lot of new things that never make it into the English language version, including a long discussion of oral cancers in house cats. Like, who knew, right? That's why it's so interesting. So my colleagues at Northwestern discovered that the concept sharing across Wikipedia articles is roughly 30%. So if you look at any two language pairs, only about a third of the conceptual content is shared between those articles, which should shock you. Did me. Go look up 9/11 in Persian, Arabic, English, and French. Those are four vastly different versions of the same story. It's sort of the Rashomon effect as seen through Wikipedia. Well, we also have this other product called YouTube, right, which you probably know about. We have lots of different kinds of ways of looking at YouTube that you might not know about. So the same way we have Google Trends, we have Google Trending Stories on YouTube. Now here's the thing to realize. Content is being uploaded to YouTube all the time at a rate you probably don't appreciate. Every minute we're here, 100 hours of content is being uploaded to YouTube. Now, a lot of that is funny cats and stuff and you don't care, but a lot of it is content that's relevant to you in your field. So I did an estimate the other day. I'm interested in computer science and having information retrieval in that sort of area. I can no longer keep up with the videos on those two topics in YouTube, let alone the published literature, journals and magazines and conferences. I can't keep up with the videos, right? This means we're living in an interesting world where the primary skill is not so much information retrieval, it's triage, right? You have to figure out how you do this. And now I know I'm pouring gasoline on your fire here, but here's breaking news, and there's a citizen tube, so people uploading news stories. So if you want to find out about, for example, the disastrous fire in New York City yesterday, this is one place you go find all those stories collected together. There's a separate trends for Google YouTube. So there's going to be endless videos of airliners in the Alps. We have a version of this just for educational content. And we just announced YouTube for Kids. It's an app that runs on your tablet computers. And it's basically for the pre-sixth grade age range. And it basically is safe search, permanently on, actually ramped up for kids with a sort of unique interface. It's very simple for kids to use. And I'm not going to tell you about it. You just know about it. You can go search for it. YouTube also, though, for those of us who have to do research, thank heavens, has a bunch of filters. And it shows up, you see that little pull-down menu there that says filters on it? That's the way you get to filter your YouTubes. And when you look at it, you can see there's a whole bunch of different options here. So I encourage you to explore this in your own time. A really interesting thing to do is go to YouTube and search for National Geographic HD within the past year or whatever you're interested in. It's a phenomenal tool. It allows you to actually cut through all the chaff and get right to the kernels that you want to look at. You know what images, right? I don't have to tell you much about this. One thing I do want to point out, though, is that Google Images allows you to use all of the repertoire of Google search tools that you already know in ways you might not have thought about. So, for example, that site colon operation works in Google Images. So let me show you this real quick because it's sort of useful. Images.google.com looks for Hubble telescope site colon like that, and we get all of your images, at least the ones we've crawled. We've also grouped some of them together. These groupings are by query spaces. So people come and they search for Hubble Space Telescope images. They look for black holes, which by definition is sort of a funny thing to look for. Nebula, wallpaper, galaxies, all this kind of stuff. And so I wanted to point that out to you because you can say things like Hubble. We can change this site to, say, .gov. All of a sudden, we're starting to get all the images from NASA and other governmental sites. Question?
So the different categories at the top, you're saying that's how people search for, that's the terms that people have applied to
Yeah.
to find those
It's
space images.
That's right.
It's not what you've assigned, so we could
We-
tell how people are looking for our content.
It gives you, exactly. So the question was, where do all those categories in the top scrolling menu come from? And those are from the way people have searched for these things in the past. So these are common search terms, and so those cluster together. So we people at Google did not make these things up. Another question?
Is there a way to do something similar to this with the reverse image search? So can I search a specific site for a specific image? For instance, I
Yeah.
know that I found an image on Getty, for instance, and I've reverse image searched it, but it hasn't come up in the list. So can I specifically search Getty?
Yes, actually. So let me, okay. So that's a picture that you said, can we find this guy? I don't know if he's here or not, but so what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on that image. See, it says search image, Google for this image. Now I'm searching by image. So basically I uploaded that picture to Google and said, can you find this? And sure enough, there are a bunch of pictures of this guy with multiple names, right? So I don't quite know what's going on here, but I'm already suspicious. But I'm going to look at the LinkedIn thing. Now, this could be totally a fake profile, but you know, whatever. It says he works at National Geographic. Is this true? We don't know. but to your point, what I could, so now I'm in the middle of search by image. So that guy does not show up on nationalgeographic.com. Okay. So what I did here is I added a search in addition to the search by image. So let me show you a slightly different way to do this. Did I do the pink fish last time? Yeah. Does anybody else remember the pink fish? A couple people. Most don't. Okay. What I'm going to do is search by image.
It was our promo image.
It was really?
For you, yeah. But
Wow.
it's very much.
I'm going to upload an image. Wow. Desktop, SBI. There it is. So I'm searching for this fish. Now, this actually doesn't tell me that much about that fish, right? It's a pretty pink fish. Well, what I can do is add some descriptive terms in addition to guide the search here. So I'm going to say big head. Try that. And all of a sudden, I've now got nothing but pink fish with big heads, right? And so I can do this, and that's not really interesting. Let's try a different one. And all of this, you can sort of click around through here, and eventually you figure out that this is a flower horn chiclet. Okay, enough of that. But this is a flower horn fish. I search for that, and I can verify it. It's that particular kind of fish. And here's the whole article about it. So what I did is I did the search by image and added additional search terms. And that will, I think, answer your question. One of the nice things, if you use the advanced search feature in images, you can narrow your search by color or by region or by usage rights. So if you're interested in usage rights is Creative Commons tags on the pictures. So we'll scan for those, and then you can filter by attribution or by no restrictions or whatever. Remember also, there are tons and tons of images out in the world. We scan Flickr and we scan a lot of these things, but sometimes you might want to find a particular property for an image. So going to, for example, Flickr, you can search by metadata that we don't have. You can search for image by photographer or location or time of day or whatever. You can also remember to search for tags like #CHI 2006 because people often use those kinds of tags to tag their image with an event. So if you go to Google and search for Chi 2006 Dan, just that, you find all these pictures of me in 2006 at this conference. So whenever you go to a conference, say ALA, figure out what the hashtag is for that conference, and all of a sudden, guess what? I found all kinds of pictures of myself talking to people I didn't remember talking to at conferences. There's a bunch of tricks here I could show you. I'm just going to tell you one right now. I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm in a situation where I'm trying to figure out what a particular piece of something is. Like, what's that part of the bicycle called? Those cluster of gears? The trick here is to do a query for object diagram. And you get all these kinds of things. And this works for other phrases, not just diagram, but also other phrases like exploded parts. Right? This is particularly useful when you're dealing with complex topics like Moby Dick. And you read about the Ford Sky Sail, and you say, I have no idea what that is. Now you can understand Moby Dick. We've got lots and lots of content in Google Books. Maybe I should just do books next time. Just do Google Books. Partly because the user interface will change between now and next year, because we've been working on it. And there's a lot of things you can do in it. I will just show you one thing, because this is probably the most useful thing for everybody here. Books.google.com. I'm going to look for, oops, typo, but yeah, whatever. There we go. So here's one. This is in preview, so I can see some parts of it. I'll just click on it. No, this looks more interesting. I'll do this. I like the cover. Now, here I'm going to get the, oh man. You see this thing, find in a library right there? Has anybody used this before? Okay, as people who need sometimes obscure books from obscure places, this is your friend. Because what this does, I click on it, it hands that metadata information about this book over to WorldCat, part of OCLC, and says, help, find me this close to me. And it found this book, and there's all the metadata for it. And it turns out you have this book. Good job. I actually did not practice this ahead of time. It was a totally random thing. But so does George Washington, so does Smithsonian, so does Dahlgren, And so in this case, it's less than 1 mile from you. Yay. And so we can click and actually, in some libraries, you can actually reserve the book. Now, obviously, National Geographic is a special case. But it's also at Library of Congress, should you need to go to it there. So let me change that, though. I'm going to change my location in 94306, which is where I live. And it's at Stanford. It's also at the Mountain View Public Library. It's also at Palo Alto University. Unfortunately, it's not in my public library, but I have a public library card for Mountain View. So I can get it there. So when you're looking for that really obscure reference journal about the fishes in Lake Tanganyika, this is how you find that book. And then you can go down the street to the Library of Congress and check it out. Patents is another thing we could go into great detail. I will tell you one big tip. Always use the advanced search UI for Google Patents. Maybe we do patents on books next time. Yeah, I don't know if you care about patents, but Google Scholar. Does anybody use Google Scholar here? Okay, most people. Okay, I use Google Scholar every day in my work, so I'm really familiar with all of its foibles. If you do a search, usually you search for an author, or you search for an author and a topic, or an institution and a topic and an author. In this case, I'm searching. This is an area I work in. You can see I've got a bunch of results here for me and my work. We can also change the type of the document. So Scholar is not just the scholarly literature, which is great, but it's also the legal literature. So if you want, you can actually go do searches like Roe v. Wade, and you can dig into, I want to see particular judgments from particular courts. You can filter by federal court, state court, and all that stuff. Okay. Now, one of the questions that Barbara gave me earlier was on how to search for data. So I told you about Public Data Explorer. This is something else. This is a new product, relatively new product, called Google Data Table Search. Guess what? Google Data Table Search. We'll find it for you. And what you can do is search for a particular kind of data set. So in this case, I searched for Connecticut brownfields, and you see, well, maybe later I can show you. I have a whole demo worked out for this, but basically what I can do is import that data. I can download the data, import it into a Google Fusion table, and then visualize it. So from the time I did the search to about now, to this map, was about 1 minute. So it's a very handy way for looking, for example, for EPA data, FDA data. All the government agencies publish tons of data, and it's always a hassle to get to and use. We've scanned all of that and made it available to you. You can import it as a CSV and manipulate it on Excel or whatever, or you can import it to a Google spreadsheet and do the same kind of things, or as a Fusion table and do visualizations of it like this. So here's a kind of worked out example. I'm looking for EPA cleanup sites in California because I care about that. The first one, I click on it as a download as a Fusion table. I geocode every entry in that data table. And here are all the data, EPA Superfund sites and cleanup brownfield sites in California. So if we had more time, we would actually go do that. But what you would end up with is something like this for brownfield remediation projects. And this is the one that's closest to you. Oh. So given more time, I would actually walk you through examples like this.
That one's
Okay, I've done this one before, about how to find a phone number given a picture. You can look it up on my blog. We do this one? How to find the length of a runway given a picture. So the big lesson here is, I want to take away is, there's a lot of stuff here. If you know it, you can actually start to do these searches. So all you need here is a tail name. You can figure out everything, like including the length of the runway, which sounds surprising, but basically what you do is you do quoted search for the tail name. That allows you to figure out where that plane came from. And it turns out, if you look at that site, the picture on the left is the plane at that same runway where the picture was that I took, happened to be. It's Taveuni in Fiji, and the length of the runway is easy to find. So once you start to find out these things, you can ask these complex questions like, here's a picture taken somewhere in the world. You might recognize it as Rio, right? What beach is it? Well, what we can do is work through all these maps examples and then go to Street View and figure out it's either Copacabana or Ipanema. And if you look at the street, see the tiling pattern on the sidewalk? It's the same as the one at Copacabana. Here's the deep thing. Once you know information like this, and you know these tools that are available and the resources that are there, someone can come up to you, as happened with me, and said, here's a picture from Earth view. What's that? Well, it looks like a runway on the left. What's that?